Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome. I'm Alexa Allen, and here we talk about conspiracies, mysteries, and true crime. This week I'm back with another unexplained case. So I kind of touched upon this subject, the Men in Black, in my Mothman video, and I'll link that right up here for you guys if you haven't got a chance to watch it yet. But I talked about wanting to do a video specifically on the Men in Black, and here we are. And this subject kind of falls somewhere between unexplained mystery and conspiracy theory, really, based on what you think. Now, I'm sure you guys have all heard of the Men in Black franchise, the comic books and the movies with Will Smith. Those characters are all based on real-life stories of encounters with these Men in Black. And that's what we're talking about today. So the Men in Black are basically these men that go around trying to silence witnesses of UFOs or extraterrestrials. They've been said to confront witnesses that plan on going public about their encounters. So I'm just going to jump right into the stories of people that have had encounters with these men. The first kind of recorded encounter with these men is on June 21st, 1947. A man named Harold Dahl is out on a boat. He's a patrolman, and he's with his son, two other men, and his dog. Now, while they're out there, Harold and his group claim to have seen these 6 flying donut-shaped objects. They said they were about 100 feet in diameter, and they were hovering about 2,000 feet above the water. They had round portholes, and they had an observation deck. So one of these aircrafts starts descending closer to the water, and Harold kind of panics because they're so close to him, and he turns his boat around and starts heading back towards the harbor. So as the aircraft gets about 500 feet above the water, one of the portholes opens up and it starts dumping out this metal into the water. Harold describes it as this lightweight, light metal, and one of the pieces actually fell onto Harold's dog and killed it. Another piece hits Harold's son in the arm, burning him and leaving a welt. So these UFOs quickly fly away after this all happens, and Harold brings his son to the ER and he calls his boss and tells him what happened. Now, I will note that Harold happened to take pictures of these UFOs while this was all happening, and when he got the film developed, the film was damaged, and it was damaged in a way that it had been exposed to high levels of radiation. When Harold's boss, Fred Chrisman, found out about all of this, he kind of didn't believe Harold, but he went down to the site anyway to investigate and see if he could see anything for himself, and he went down to the shore to take some rock samples. And while Fred was down there, he did happen to see one of the UFOs himself. He said he felt like he was being watched. So the following morning, Harold is visited by one of these men in black. It's this man wearing all black, and he comes to Harold and he asked him to go for breakfast. Harold agrees, and he says when they had breakfast together, this man knew everything about the occurrences of the previous day, and he didn't really ask Harold any questions. He basically told him what had happened and asked him to keep quiet about it. Harold said the man threatened his son if he were to go to the press with any of the information about the UFOs. Harold and Fred go to the press anyway, and soon after, Harold's son actually goes missing. And then he's found later that summer in Montana, and he says he has no memory of how he got there. On July 31st of that same year, Harold is visited by 2 men from the Air Force, Captain Lee Davidson and First Lieutenant Frank Brown. They were both pilots and intelligence specialists for the U.S. Air Force. Harold said he met with them for several hours, talking about the events of that day and what he saw, and he said they actually left with a piece of the metal sample. They had traveled to Harold by plane, so they left in a B-52 bomber. But 20 minutes after takeoff, that plane crashed into the ocean, killing them both. Witnesses claim to have heard anti-aircraft guns shoot before the plane went down. The U.S. Air Force claims that it was just an accident and something malfunctioned with the plane. And to this day, the Harold Dahl UFO encounter is widely believed to be a hoax. So the second encounter happens in 1953 with a man named Albert K. Bender, who was the founder of the International Flying Saucer Bureau. He had a small publication called the Space Review. Now, in 1953, he was said to have made this major discovery that would prove the existence of extraterrestrials. But before he could publish anything about it, Albert says he was visited by the Men in Black. Albert described them as tall, bald, wearing all black, and very ominous. He said they were very intimidating, and they told him he needed to stop talking about UFOs and extraterrestrials or he would be harmed or killed. And Albert was so scared and intimidated by this visit, he destroyed all of his research and never published the article that he was planning on publishing. He shut down his publication completely. He said he couldn't eat or sleep, and he wouldn't even talk about UFOs anymore with the people that he knew. He never really told anyone the specific details about what the men in black told him, but it was scary enough for him to just do all of this and shut everything down. Shortly after, Albert also received a phone call, and he said he didn't hear anyone's voice on the other end, but it was clear that someone was there. And he said he felt physically ill after the call and that it was in some way threatening, even though he didn't hear a threat, he just felt it. Later in life, Albert wrote a book called Flying Saucers and the Three Men, but a lot of people that read his previous work said it was very different and he was clearly leaving out a lot of stuff, and it seemed like he was just dancing around the subject, I guess. In 1964, over in England, a local historian and fireman, Jim Templeton, was out on a day trip with his daughter. They went to Burgh Marsh, and he happened to snap 3 photos of his daughter while they were there. When he got the photos developed, the middle photo had something standing in the background that he didn't notice in person. And that something in the background appears to be a spaceman. News spread fast about this photograph. It made the local newspaper, and soon it made the world news. Soon after, Jim claims that he was visited by 2 men in black suits. They didn't have names, they only referred to each other as number 9 and number 10. And they claimed to be government agents. Jim claims they approached him demanding to see the picture, and they actually drove him out to the location where the picture was taken, and they asked him to recount the events of that day. Jim kept telling them, "I never saw anything in person. I only saw it in the photograph after it was developed." And the men were so unsatisfied with Jim's answer, they just left him there and drove away to walk home or find a way home himself. In 1967, in Toledo, Ohio, a man named Robert Richardson is driving late at night on the outskirts of town, and he actually gets into an accident with something. He hits something in the road. He doesn't know what it is, but he says as soon as he hits the object, it disappears. Robert, of course, stopped the car and got out to look around to see if he could find anything, and he said all he could find was this small, strange metal. It was like a lightweight white metal. A few days later, Robert said these men come to his door at 11 o'clock at night. They were driving a 1953 black Cadillac. They were wearing all black, black sunglasses, black hat. They start pressing Robert for information about the accident, and they're demanding that he hand over the metal that he found. And Robert's like, "I don't have it anymore. I sent it out for analysis," which he actually did, and it came back inconclusive. And apparently they said to him, "If you want your wife to stay as pretty as she is, you'll hand over the metal." And again, he's like, "I don't have it." And he said he would get it for them, but he never heard from them again after that night. Now, this is my favorite encounter because I feel like it's the most disturbing. And also it happened right here in Maine in Old Orchard Beach. So on September 11th, 1976, Dr. Herbert Hopkins, who was a psychiatrist, was home alone studying a recent UFO incident. This was sort of a hobby of his. He did a lot of UFO and alien research in his free time. So he gets a call from a man who claims to be from the New Jersey UFO organization. Dr. Hopkins later finds out that this is not a real organization. The man asked Dr. Hopkins if he was alone and if he could come to discuss the UFO research that he's been doing. Dr. Hopkins was in fact alone, but he said it was very strange because he was almost never alone. Him and his wife kind of did everything together, but that particular night his sons had wanted to go to the drive-in, and they asked their parents if they wanted to go. And his wife ended up going with them, but Dr. Hopkins, he says he doesn't like the movies. He doesn't like anything fiction. He says it's a waste of time. He won't even read a book that is fiction. So he stayed home and he was by himself. So this man, who hasn't even identified himself by name, is asking to come over and talk about this UFO research. At this point, Dr. Hopkins doesn't even know how this man knows that he's researching this stuff. But he says, "Yeah, you can come over." Later on, Dr. Hopkins would say, "I have no idea what came over me. I don't know why I would invite a stranger over to my house, especially because he's a psychiatrist and he has medications in his house and he's very protective about who he lets in. It has to be somebody that he knows very well because that could potentially become a problem. He even kept a gun in the house because he was afraid that some patients could break in and steal the medication. So again, he's like, I don't even know why I said yes, but I did. So Dr. Hopkins hangs up the phone and he goes to turn the porch light on for this guy when he comes over. But when he turns the light on, the man's already standing at his doorstep. So Dr. Hopkins describes this guy. He's wearing all black, of course. He says he has this plastic-like pale skin and that he's completely bald. No eyebrows, no eyelashes, no hair at all on his whole body. He said he had ruby red lips and that his movements were very mechanical and he didn't even move his head without moving his whole body with it. And he sounded robotic. There was no influx in his voice, just monotone. But even so, he's like, come on in, sit on my couch. And Dr. Hopkins said it was like talking to a ventriloquist dummy. He sat up very straight and he's not moving and his mouth's moving, mechanically, just creepy. So this part literally gives me chills. The man in black is wearing these gray suede gloves. And at one point during the conversation, he casually wipes his mouth. And Dr. Hopkins said that when he does this, the ruby red lips rub right off and they're on his glove, and he notices that there's no lips where they should be. It's just a slit in his face, and he said that the ruby red lipstick was there to kind of just be painted on lips and give the appearance of lips. So then the man says to Dr. Hopkins, you have 2 coins in your pocket. And Dr. Hopkins did have 2 coins in his pocket. So he said, I want you to take one of them out. And he did. And he goes to hand it to the man, and the man is like, no, you hold on to it. I want you to look at it. So Dr. Hopkins is like, okay, and he's looking at the coin. So it's a penny that he has in his hand. Dr. Hopkins says it turns from copper to silver, and then it starts turning blue, and then slowly, right before his eyes, the coin just disappears. So then the man says, do you know Barney and Betty Hill? So he's like, yeah, I know of them. Isn't Barney dead now? And the guy goes, yes, he is. Do you know how he died? And Dr. Hopkins said, no, I'm not really sure. I know it was suddenly. Was it a heart attack? And the man in black says, no, not exactly. He died because he knew too much. And the way that he died is not of a heart attack. It's because he no longer had a heart. Just like you no longer have that coin. The man then says very matter-of-factly, you're going to destroy all your research. And he says, I'll know when you've done it. And if you don't do it, you're going to suffer the same fate as Barney Hill. The man then says, my energy is running low. I must go. And Dr. Hopkins says, he says it almost like his battery is running low. Like the words are very spaced out. And when this man gets up, he's kind of stumbling to the door. And Dr. Hopkins says this man kind of stumbles around the corner of the house where the driveway is. And as he does, he sees this kind of a bright light. And Dr. Hopkins describes it as something he's never really seen before. He says it was almost like a cold bluish light. And this is 1976, so they don't know those hydrogen, is that what they're called? Hydrogen lights? They haven't seen those yet. So this is probably similar to what Dr. Hopkins was seeing. Dr. Hopkins was terrified after this encounter, and he did end up destroying all of his research. When his wife came home, she said she found him sitting at the dinner table with his gun, and she'd never seen him like that before. And after this encounter, Dr. Hopkins actually had a lot of trouble with his phone. He said when patients would call, they said they couldn't get through to his house. And when he was on phone calls, he would hear clicking sounds and calls would drop. He said he would call the phone company over and over asking what the issue was. And they were like, I don't know, there's no issue. And finally, they did an investigation. And the response from the phone company was, yeah, your phones are definitely tapped. In 1979, in Scotland, cryptozoologist Frank Holliday claimed to have seen a man in black. He was at Loch Ness looking for evidence of Nessie when he noticed a man standing there. And it was kind of one of those moments where you look 1 second and then you look back and he was there. He said the man was dressed in all black and something was just off about him. And Fred noticed that the man was just staring at him and not blinking. And then he said he heard a noise and it distracted him for a second, so he looked away, and then when he looked back, that man was gone. So we do have a celebrity encounter with the Men in Black as well, and it is by Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd is actually an avid believer in UFOs and extraterrestrials. He He claims to have seen 4 UFOs firsthand, and he strongly believes that the government knows about aliens and UFOs and that they're kind of covering it up to the public as a power grab. His belief is that if the public finds out about aliens and UFOs, they won't have such a strong belief in their government anymore. So in 2005, Dan Aykroyd actually had a show about UFOs and aliens in production, and it was called Out There. The Sci-Fi Network had picked the show up. And his story is that one day he was out on his porch smoking and he got a phone call from Britney Spears. And she's asking him, hey, do you want to be a co-host on SNL with me? And he's chatting and he notices a man across the street all in black just staring at him, kind of like an intimidating way and very ominous. And they sort of just stared at each other for a few moments, not breaking a stare. And he said after a few moments, the guy just gets in his car and drives off. And he was like, what was that about? But later that day, Dan received a phone call that his show had been canceled. And it should be noted that Dan Aykroyd was just about to do an episode interviewing Dr. Stephen Greer of the Disclosure Project. And he aims at enticing Congress to hold open, secrecy-free hearings on extraterrestrial activity on Earth, as well as develop legislation to allow peaceful exploration of space. He was apparently set to disclose insider information about UFO activity and give a witness testimony. And the last one I'm going to talk about is in 2008. These men in black were actually caught on camera. This happened in October 2008 at the Sheraton Hotel in Niagara Falls. 2 weeks prior to their arrival, the hotel manager and a member of the staff had witnessed a UFO, a triangle-shaped UFO, flying in the sky. These 2 men were said to be of identical height and stature, wearing all black suits, trench coats, hats, and glasses. A bellboy and another female employee claimed that they were interrogated by these men, and they were demanding to see the manager, this specific manager that had witnessed the UFO. The female employee said when she saw them up close, they had no hair at all. They had plastic-like looking skin, ruby red lips, and low and mechanical voices like robots. They referred to each other as numbers, not names, and she said that she knew it sounded crazy, but she got the strong impression that they were reading her mind. And there's actually no footage of these men exiting the hotel, just entering. No one knows how they left. I don't know what to think about this. It really creeps me out, but especially the guy from Maine, just hearing the audio recording of him talking about this encounter, it's just somehow more believable because it's close to home, I guess. And it's a doctor. Like, why would he want to lie about this and discredit himself? There is no solid proof of these guys, and it is a theory, but so was Area 51 until 2005. Everyone thought that that was some made-up place. I think this could be something that we find out later on that, oh, that was a government agency that was real. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.